Well, it's the first ever Immersion tour. We have never toured before as Immersion, anywhere, ever. If you look on the Immersion website, at the bottom of the page, there's a kind of link to the past gigs. There's like 1998, there's like one show, and 2001 show, and then 2015, like 4 shows, and 2017, like 7 shows, and then suddenly it was this year. It's amazing. It's been it's been a sort of massive punt, but it's turned out to, it's like a road trip with gigs. That's what it's been like.
Why was it different this time? Why, after all these years, did you decide to lean into it?
When you start playing live, you want a tour.
How did that come about in the first place? Obviously, you guys have been playing off and on in this form before.
Yeah.
So how did it transform into a live band?
Mainly because technology sort of allowed us to realize it live, to think, yeah, we can do it.
It's been 18 years or something like that since the last record?
The first album came out in 94. It was the kind of backbone of Swim through the late 90s. I mean, there was all the remixers, and then some of the remixers became Swim artists, and the whole thing spun off on a life of its own. And we kind of took it to its kind of logical conclusion with Low Impact, which is the kind of the most abstract Immersion album. And then, I don't know, just stuff happened. I mean, the whole way, the way the decade changed, the millennial cusp, suddenly it all became about rock music and guitars and drums and stuff like that. And we just felt that, you know, Immersion didn't really fit with that anymore.
We heard more kind of electronic music, and we thought we belong in the same world.
I mean, obviously Wire happened again around the millennial cusp. That was when it started again.
Wire keeps happening, it seems like.
Yeah, and then then we did Githead through quite a lot of the last decade. That was quite a big thing. It did tour, not that much, but it did tour. And then we got to this kind of thing. Githead kind of fell apart around 2014 when we moved to Brighton, and we just started to think about, we wanted to do something. I mean, Malka did a solo album in 2012, and we had a band that supported that, but it was an impossible group. It was 2 people who live in Tel Aviv, 1 person who lives in Berlin, and us. You can't do a gig for 50 quid in the local pub, you know, with that kind of lineup. You know, it's just not possible to just, you know, so you can only do special things. So that means you can't play very often, and it's blah-de-blah-de-blah. So
being a couple makes it very compact and easy to, especially touring. We can share a room, just the 2 of us. We try and not have too much gear with us, so it's quite compact.
Yeah, I mean, we just thought that if we could have something that was just us and we could do things with it, and it's just obvious that we should go back to doing Immersion. And, you know, as Malka said, we started to feel there could be a place for that. I mean, perhaps not going back to the very abstract Immersion of the late 90s, but they're somehow informed by the way that dance music, electronic music, what happened in the last decade to it was it became very impure in kind of an interesting way. I mean, in the 90s, dance music was quite, if you know the history of dance music, you know by a drum beat, by the use of an instrument, what kind of music, what style it is. You know, what's the difference between techno and electro and house? You know, they're defined by very simple and obvious elements if you know what those elements are.
How much are these external forces, how much are these sort of cultural trends really influencing you? Obviously, to some degree, it's whether or not it's economically feasible to do this, right? Whether people interested in it enough to, you know, come out or to buy a record.
I think it was to do, how did we get back to doing it? So I think because what happened with kind of electronic music just became every music. So the kind of production, the way that you would produce a Wire record is no different to how you would produce any other kind of music. So it seemed like you could just take more obviously electronic elements and then just make, but it's not even that. It's just, it's so organic. Immersion is completely organic. It's just kind of what we feel like, really, to be really honest.
I think it's quite hard to place it style-wise. I mean, it's electronic, but, you know, talking about electro or house or techno.
It doesn't fit with any of that stuff.
So the through line is just, this is the music that the 2 of you produce when you're together alone.
Well, it's one of the music we produce. But it's the purest form, I would say, of the 2 of us. Nobody sings, so it's got kind of freedom to just play.
How essential to your relationship has this process of creating music? Were the 2 of you collaborating prior to becoming an item, as they say?
No, we were an item. Well, we became an item. Well, that's kind of slightly complex because I was producing her band when we fell in love. In fact, I hadn't even started producing them when we fell in love. But that's a different.
Fast.
Once we got together, we very quickly played together music.
It was kind of obvious. I mean, with Minimal Compact, when they lived lived in Chaussée de Vlergat in Brussels, and it had a kind of big rambling, it was upstairs, sort of flat or apartment over 3 or 4 floors, and right in the top floor they had a room where they had an 8-track and a mixing board, and they would just record all the time. Malka was kind of used to that environment, so the first thing we bought as a couple was an 8-track and a mixing board. Malka was used to having the means to make music at home. It was something I'd never had. We didn't buy a washing machine. Not then. We bought an 8-track and a mixing board and started making music more or less straight away.
So it sounds like it was almost, the music making process from the beginning was pretty effortless between the two of you.
Yeah, I would say so. Which is fun, because when you're in bands, as much as you love the bands and the people you're with, there's always ego problems. And you feel like you're held back in some ways, or you can't say, or you have an opinion about everything.
There's got to be a little bit of competition between the two of you. You don't feel that at all?
Competition, no, but we might argue about how something might be mixed, or an element that I think, oh, it doesn't work, and Colin thinks it works. But competition?
We have chosen each other as life partners. I don't want to make that sound too dramatic, but you can't have those kind of inter-band fights.
I mean, you can have competition. Let's say if he's in wire and I'm in minimal, then there might be some kind of, I don't know. Is there? But if you're making music together, especially Immersion, it's it's fun, it's free, and it's kind of real because of it.
I've always said that the quickest way to test a relationship is to move in with somebody. I suspect, having never been in a touring band, that the touring process is that times 100, right? It's that, but really just in sort of really, really tight quarters.
Yeah, it's a big test. And it's a bit like family, where you might not, sometimes you can't stand someone in your band, but you're kind of stuck together. It's like a family. You don't choose your family.
How many hours a day or how many hours a week are the two of you, sitting down and collaborating and producing music? You gave me a little sneer as I asked that question.
No, it's hard. It's hard because basically, I run Pink Flag, which is Wire's label. I spent the first 6 months of this year working on the Wire re-releases. I didn't get in the studio at all, hardly.
If there's an Immersion album we're working on, we'll work a lot. But then if, we're doing some other things, then we're not going to work for a few weeks or months even.
I think we have to be focused. I think that the idea of going in the studio every day and trying to come up with something, that must be terrifying.
Is that where most of the actual creation is happening, in the studio itself, or the two of you don't sit around and play around with instruments?
No, you want it recorded. Why play around and not record? So you play and record.
We all have recording studios on our
We do actually have a studio. It's a home studio, but it's still a studio. It's a dedicated space, which is only for making, and that studio has existed. The first was when we lived in 2 places in Brussels, and then when we moved to London we had it, and now we have it in Brighton. That studio has just developed, and we go as far as investing in soundproofing and making a space that works sonically so that you can mix in there. So it's it's a proper working studio, but it's obviously not open to the general public. It's just for us to work in and whoever we choose to work with.
We do like to collaborate with other people.
Yeah, that's part of the Immersion thing. Obviously, we're touring with Matt Schultz from Holy Fuck. So we came back to Immersion in 2015. Who's going to remember that we made our last album in 1999? We didn't start from a point of view like anybody would know anything about it at all, that we had a ready-made audience. We'd have to create an audience. So we had the feeling that the best thing to do is start from home, so make an audience in Brighton. So we started a series of evenings under the title Nanocluster. Nanocluster is an event. You would call it a club night, but club night means to some people kind of people dancing and stuff. It's an event which has been for the last 3 times held in one particular venue in Brighton. What it basically is there are 4 half-hour slots. The first one is always an opener, and then Immersion will play for half an hour, and then a guest of our choosing will play for half an hour, and then the last half hour is us and the guest playing together. But that's not jamming. We've spent hopefully a week or a couple of weeks preparing stuff remotely, and then 2 or 3 days rehearsing to get that half an hour. So that audience is going to get something totally unique, completely new material that's been devised by us and our guest.
Did you find that, as suspected, that you really did sort of have to start from scratch all over again?
Just doing this tour, we feel like a young band, We're not kind of spoiled about how much hard work it is or which clubs and how we treat it.
We have quite low expectation. Realistically, as I said at the beginning, this tour has been a massive punt. Seeing if a little bit, having a new album which is getting really good responses, and the amount of promotion that we are able to do and generate around it can generate any audience at all for it. And we've discovered it does create an audience. It's not a huge audience, but there are people coming. But the thing which is the most interesting is the strength of their reactions. I mean, how much people really like it. We completely had no idea whether anyone would just think it's just like, oh yeah. You know, people coming up thinking, who are kind of Wire fans or Minimal Compact fans or something like that, and thinking, yeah, well, it's not the same thing. We are, in our own weird way, trying to develop our own audience. I mean, it's the only thing you can do.
It has to be doubly hard. I was actually talking to Caroline, who works with you as a publicist, and asking her whether, you know, was that much more difficult to promote something that was instrumental, right? I mean, that's, I suspect, the thing that might be hardest for fans to make the transition to.
Well, we have audience that know previous whatever we do. It feels like they open to it and enjoy it. But sure, I mean, music without vocals is more difficult.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I don't. For me, I kind of like the purity of it, you know. I think if we started to stick vocals on it, then it would become something else. I mean, there would be a more commercial direction to take if we wanted. It wouldn't be hard to do, but at the moment, I mean, Malka's thinking, well, if we want to take a more commercial direction, that would be a thing to do. But like, as soon as I open my mouth on a record, first line of the review will mention Pink Flag, and the next line will compare anything that it is negatively with Wire. It doesn't really matter. Remember when we started Gethead, it was just all talking. I only talk. People still, I can't, you know, for me, it just seems like it's a massive trap.
I suspect it could be frustrating, though, you know, knowing that the two of you could play in, you know, the forms of your past bands and have that built-in audience. Is it frustrating at all once you're starting over again to have to really sort of start from scratch?
Not really. I mean, of course you want audience, but you want to be kind of liked for what you do. And if it means building from the bottom up, then so be it. You need the years of kind of playing and releasing albums for things to happen.
I don't know. Again, we came to it with zero expectation, and we appeared to be developing a small audience. Some pretty out of the way places, people actually turned up to see a show and thought it was great. So then the next stage, I guess, is to kind of take that back to the UK. At the moment, we've played more times in Brighton than anywhere else. I mean, our Nanocloster nights have now become very popular to a small and dedicated audience. So we have a scene. We built a scene in Brighton for Immersion. People do know who it is and what we're doing. And I think that's, you know, to develop out from there must be the strategy. I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Maybe traveling wasn't, you know, as easy as it was when you were younger, just sort of like getting out, spending that much time on the road. I mean, obviously at some point, time becomes finite. You only have so much more time left on Earth to continue to create music.
I mean, as long as it feels okay. And actually, our son is grown up, so we're free. We can do what we like and we're having fun. I mean, I thought it's going to be hard, but I don't find it hard.
That might almost be a motivator, this idea that, like, maybe we can't really do this forever, so let's really sort of commit to this project. I mean, is that part of what drove this?
To an extent, but I think we think about it in a much more, maybe naive way. It's just like, if you do something good, it's like Field of Dreams, you know. If you build it, then they'll come. Maybe they won't, I don't know. But I mean, just, first of all, you have to make it as good as it can possibly be. Like, it's no good. No, definitely, people of our age producing substandard work, which is a pale reflection of what they are supposed to have done in their youth, is really just pointless. Entirely pointless.
Or try and repeat something you were successful with in order to keep being successful. I mean, I'd rather not do anything than do that.
You had mentioned the reissues before, and you specifically have never struck me as being a particularly nostalgic person, but you do kind of have to live with your feet on both sides of the fence.
Yes, it's an interesting... I couldn't... I mean, the way I explained it to our distribution, because we have the same distributor for Swim and Pink Flag, was I really wanted to get this Immersion album out this year, in spite of the fact that the Wire releases were happening, because as an artist, it was really, really important. For me, it's important that, proud of what's gone in the past, put a lot of effort into those re-releases. I mean, especially the special editions. I mean, that was a lot of work. I personally put a lot of work into that. But on the other side, it's great, but I don't live there anymore. it's the past. It's somewhere, the past is a very familiar country you can no longer visit or be in. It's just like that belongs over there, and that's absolutely fine. This is what I'm doing now. I do other things besides this, but this is actually pretty important to me. Because it's us. It's because it's Malka and I. I mean, we're doing it together, you know.
Because it's good.
Yeah, because it's good, yeah.
I've been in New York for probably 13, 14 years now, and when I first moved out here, I was in, living in squalor as you do when you first move to a new place. And I found myself becoming romantic about that terrible time. And that's a thing that you risk, I think, when you live in the past, is it becomes easy to overly romanticize things.
Yeah.
Sure. But I have some kind of attachment to not being spoiled or thinking, well, it's beneath me. I like the feeling of working hard and doing the real work rather than somebody's doing for you because you've done it already. And so, yeah, it's kind of romanticizing as well, but I know what you mean.
You touched on this a little bit before. It's not that common for people past the age of, 30 to really continue to be able to do this for a living, to continue to be able to tour and to get people out. So if you can sort of take a step outside, you can become appreciative of the fact that, you're still able to do this at this point in your life.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's also fun. You can be even, I think you don't really need to tie yourself up in knots about it. It was a simple thought. Okay, how do we get an audience? Let's play some gigs.
Yeah.
Okay. The logistic of it was simply that when we did last year Drill LA and the series of shows that Wire did in 2 parts, we got 3-year visas. And because Immersion played Drill LA, Malka got 3-year visa as well. So we had 3-year visas. That times a lot of things, even times the release time of the next Wire album. Yeah. And I said to Botch, who's our agent, if Immersion is ever going to tour America, we should do it now because we've got at least we don't have to pay for the visas. We've got the visas already, so that's one cost. So we, price out the flights, see if we can get round and do this without losing a heap of money.
There's nothing like playing lots of gigs to improve and develop what you're doing. And it's something I really miss, like touring long tours where you start only yesterday, which was almost a month after the beginning of the tour, I started to feel like, yeah, it's coming together in a good way. Unfortunately, tonight is the last.
Yeah.
But it does work like that. You need to play a lot to kind of get the feel of it, get the feel of the audience, and subtly change what you do. You're
obviously both very tired, Colin, as you had mentioned before we started recording. I think you got in around 4 a.m. last night, but you seem incredibly happy and excited to be here, a little bit melancholy with the fact that it's coming to an end. I suspect that maybe that means that it's not going to be another 18 years before the next Immersion record comes out.
Actually, the next thing, what's happening with the whole nanocluster thing is every time we work with somebody, so far we've worked with Ulrich Schnaus, Laetitia Sadier and Tarwater. Those things get recorded in the studio. So actually probably the next thing that we'll do will be a nanocluster record. And then there'll probably be another Immersion record after that. Unless we decide we're doing another Immersion record before that. Let's see how the nanocluster thing turns out. Because we were thinking of we might have a nanocluster festival.
That was a joke, I thought.
It's not a joke. No, it's not. Andy was well convinced that's going to work.
This is a really good problem to have too many potential musical projects going around.
I think the thing is it's all about association. Is Immersion going to be that bloke out of Wire and his wife, or depends on where you are, that woman out of Minimal Compact and her husband, or is it going to be, oh yeah, they've worked with those people and they've done that and they've done that and that's oh yeah, they're also in those other things. You can see how it touches other artists and other places.
Beyond that, place is doing more and more things and being recognized for being Immersion.
Being recognised for being Immersion.
For this to happen, we have to do more. But another tour in America, I don't know.
Pretty much every promoter said we'd have you back any time, and some of those audiences were pretty small. So I think that's to do with the quality of it. I mean, those people are going to be going away and saying to their friends and their relatives or whatever, we saw a fantastic show, and hopefully the word will get around. But we can only do it if we'd have just put the album out. We'd have got a few great reviews, and then the people who heard it had heard it. This is a way, by continuing activity, by doing different things, by making those associations, it's a way in which people can say, oh yeah, that's who Immersion are.
And it makes it much more real, playing it live in front of people.
You've both had long careers, and in the time it seems like there's never, been a particularly long stretch in which you weren't actively making music. It's pretty much been an unbroken concept.
When our son was born, I probably didn't. A few months, I didn't.
A few months, though, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty short.
Maybe a year. I don't know how long. I don't really know.
I don't know. It just seems it's part of what you do.
It's part of our lives.
Yeah, it's part of our life.
Is there a sense, if this particular project hadn't had the positive critical reception that it had and hadn't enabled you to tour across the country, that, you would still, even if you were just continuing to play those smaller clubs that you were at the beginning, that you would still be collaborating in this form?
I don't know. I mean, as I said, we tried various things. I mean, would we go back and do more Malka solo albums? Would we do? I mean, Malka even said to me like a year ago, you should do another Colin solo record. And I was like, I don't know. I haven't got concept for it.
You have to be realistic. When I was in a band and released albums, you sold a lot, you had lots of gigs. It came very easy. And I know it's hard now. Unless you're a really big name, it's hard for most people. So you have to be kind of realistic about it and not give up.
So you're obviously still having fun doing this. What is the most sort of purely enjoyable part of the process for you? I
mean, actually, strangely enough, there's the driving. Some of the drives have been amazing. Also, the gigs. I've been really enjoying the gigs. Yeah. I've enjoyed a lot of them. I don't get to I just think, it's quite, some of the stuff I have to do is quite complex. And I just kind of I just have a logical sequence and I go through and do the things I need to do. And in a certain way, we don't really have to perform that much. And I don't have to front it, which is a great relief for me. So I don't know. I mean, but also the making of the music, making new pieces. When a piece starts and then when it comes together and then when it gets mixed, it's all a joy. It's all fantastic, fantastic fun.
Matt Schultz, who plays the drums, and the way it fits together, it's kind of magical. I really enjoy playing with other people. I mean,
we've seen Holy Fuck loads of times, and we know Matt's a great drummer, and he can play on top of machines very well. So I mean, he was obviously a good choice. I mean, we've also worked in the past with Ronald Lippock from Tarwater, who is also a great drummer who can play on top of machines. I mean, it's one of those. It's a skill. And they're very different kind of people. I was reading an interview with her earlier, and you said something along the lines of, as you get older, you kind of have more to prove in terms of, people sort of taking you seriously or coming out to the shows. You almost have to push a little bit harder on that. Yeah, there's always this kind of basic ageism. It's the unspoken ism. This band changes the math on that a little bit, right? I mean, it's just a different performance style. I think just, we are what we are. I think we do have to find a way to certainly get to an audience who are in their 20s and 30s. Yeah. I mean, that's because those are the people who come out. To be frank and brutal, 20s, 30s and 40s really is the audience that you want. You can't, if we bring an audience our age, then there's going to be 5 people in the audience every night. That's the same with Wire. It's exactly the same. There you go. That was Malka Spigel and Colin Newman of Immersion and Minimal Compact and Wire. Their latest record, Sleepless, is out now. Thanks so much to them for taking the time to do that. Thanks to Caroline for helping set up that conversation. Thanks to you guys, as always, for listening to the program. If you like the show, there are a number of ways to support us. You can rate and review us on iTunes or Google Podcasts. We are on Spotify now. Like us on Facebook. If you have any feedback, it's rylcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Tumblr. That's rylcast.tumblr.com. That is the first and best place to get all of your RIYL related information. And I think that's about all we got for this week. So stick around because we are going to be back just about this time next week with another episode of RIYL.